Good day to everyone. This is Anthony O'Sullivan, Director and Partner at Whiteshield Partners, and I'm here with Professor Pawel Wojciechowski, Director at Whiteshield Partners, for the launch of the 2021 Global Labor Resilience Index. Professor Wojciechowski, we have several questions for you about the Global Labor Resilience Index and the 2021 edition. We're living some particular times, as you know, and resilience to shocks has been more important than ever globally, and in particular for a number of countries in Europe. And European countries have done very well overall in the 2021 GLRI. They're quite dominating at the top, in particular the Nordic countries. But there are many gaps and many differences, inequalities, if you want, even within Europe. How do you account for this? What do you think is happening here in Europe on labor resilience?
I guess there are two observations you have mentioned. First of all, the first observation is that Europe as a region strengthened its position in the world. The new ranking shows that 9 out of 10 countries in the newest ranking are from Europe. Of course, that partially results from the new framework put in place, more emphasis on the key capabilities required for countries to better prepare for both short-term shocks, such as COVID-19, and longer-term stresses, such as technological disruption and green transition. The second observation is that the improvement of labor market resilience is uneven. The West and Northern European countries, you've mentioned Nordic countries, have strong capabilities and show a balanced profile across the index components. Other countries, especially Eastern European countries, experience decline in the rank. That concerns countries like Estonia, Slovakia, Hungary. The causes are, of course, very diverse, as the index captures many changes and many components, but the most important factor is the demographic change. The demography will continue to play its role, as the Eastern European countries age much faster than the Western Europe. So I suspect that as a region, Europe will grow and continue to be doing well, but the gap among the countries will increase.
Thank you, Professor. So that's insightful directions and comments on Europe as a whole and its resilience in labor markets. Would you give us maybe some ideas or insights or examples of what European countries could do in the future to improve their labor market resilience and maybe also reduce some of those gaps between European countries?
Well, the positive side is that the region has a positive rank gap. That means that policy changes can contribute to improvements in labor market resilience over short term. There needs to be a focus on the next stage of the current crisis, recovery and transformation. One important element of that, of course, is that the European Union has prepared a new large facility called by many the new Marshall Plan for Europe, that focuses exactly on recovery and building resilience. So now we have the time that many European countries prepare national recovery plans that combine reforms, including the labor market reforms and investment packages. And this is of course on top of the EU funding from the multi-year budget. So the prospects for recovery and resilience are looking rather good for Europe. Of course, Europe needs some improvements, talking about closing the gaps, the demographic change, for example, could be offset by new immigration policies. Of course, there needs to be support for job mobility through active labor market policies with focus on reskilling and commitment to lifelong learning. Of course, the element that ties in with demography is how to incentivize to work harder and longer, for example, through tax and social insurance policies. One element that cannot be omitted is, of course, the support for businesses as they deal with the ongoing restrictions placed upon them or changes in revenue sources. So altogether, I think Europe continue to be looking very good in the ranking, except that some of the gaps will be growing.
So, Professor, you mentioned that the index is structured along structural dimensions and policy dimensions. Structural, which are the likes of demographics, which take longer to adjust, and policy, which is relatively shorter term, such as labor or education policy. On those two dimensions, which do you think European countries have the most chance to influence as a group?
I think that the structural dimension is very important. I think as we face some major challenges, such as climate change and digital transformation, of course, it's important to understand how those challenges would be grasped by the EU policies. So, in fact, we would need to focus more on how to mitigate the effects of climate change and how to increase the resilience of labor market. In fact, I think that most of the things that are being built now in those national recovery plans are aiming at this direction. We must remember that, for example, in Europe, in this in next generation EU, about 37% of funds ought to be climate related, and about 20% digital related. So that actually gives the boost to come up with some projects that would boost this transition, climate and digital transition in Europe.
Now, Professor, you're an expert on the European Union, and the index itself measures a series of dimensions for individual countries that they can improve on labor market resilience, but does not measure specifically the effect of being part of an entity like the European Union. Would you have a couple of thoughts for us on how being part of the European Union contributes or does not contribute to labor market resilience?
Yes, it's. I think it comes from the perspective. We must come from the perspective that Alan Acemoglu, I would say the most quoted economist, writes in his book "Why Nations Fail," and his observation is that we must develop good institutions. The institutional development is very important to foster growth and cohesion. And in fact, this is the source of inspiration that Poland and other countries in Europe get from the EU type of coordinated efforts to contribute to building together institutions. So the EU is providing some institutional framework that increases competitiveness of economies, but at the same time focuses on cohesion elements. And of course, one of the key elements, of course, is how the labor market is working, whether it's resilient, whether provides those institutions would provide not only cohesion but also the productivity growth of labor. And in fact, most policies are, of course, a trade-offs among different policies. But most important is that the EU is coordinating this institutional development that, in the long run, contributes to good results.
Very clear, Professor. And you mentioned institutions as critical, and the EU being particularly strong in contributing to stronger institutions for European countries. In fact, institutions and good governance was recognized as a cross-cutting capability covering both structural dimensions and policy dimensions of labor market resilience. So thank you for those observations. Maybe to close, is there any country for you that stands out in terms of its good practices in the area of labor market resilience that you might want to highlight, or even a particular practice that you think has struck you from the European Union, which has really had a strong effect on labor market resilience from your perspective?
I think that excellent examples are coming up from Nordic countries. This called flex security concept, the Danish concept, became a EU policy for years, and now many countries are looking how to implement that as well. Another example is, of course, the examples that come from the smaller countries, which is not a EU country, but from Switzerland, that actually is providing, having a very good development of skills in the country. It's becoming very competitive, not only through very good universities, but commitment to R&D and some zones that would that in which you can invest and work on, such as developing of high-tech industries in Switzerland. So Switzerland is not only a country of for skiers, but and not only produces the watches, and it's not only the banking sector, but the high-tech industry that develops there. And many Europeans, go to Switzerland to work and contribute to the economy of this country.
Very good, great. Very clear. Thank you so much, Professor. And we look forward to continuing to have the pleasure of having your insights on this domain. Thank you.
Thank you very much.